Hi, I'm Taryn and welcome to Hawkesbury Regional Gallery Art Online. Today we will be doing an artwork with oil pastels, and as usual I have a step-by-step instruction sheet that you can download on our website, or you can just sit there and watch our video that we're doing right now, and I'll take you through how to do it all. Okay, so I'll show you how we're going to get started. So you'll see on your instruction sheet we've got how to draw it first, and then we've got each step on how to colour. Now, we're going to be using oil pastels. So some of you may know that there's two different sorts of pastels. There's chalk pastels, which are quite powdery, or you've got oil pastels, which are a little bit like a crayon. Now, both types of pastels you can blend. If you're using chalk pastels, you could follow all these same instructions, but what you do is you blend it with your fingers, whereas we're using oil pastels, so we're going to be blending ours with a tissue or some paper towel that you've got on hand. But the same steps work for either, depending on what you've got at home. So you can see here the picture I've done, I've used some cold colours. So just to make it a little bit different and to play with sort of a completely different look, today I'm going to be using some warm colours for my background, so you can see the difference between the two. So let's get started. I'll move this out of the way. So step one is you're going to take a lead pencil and you're just going to draw a circle. Make it pretty big on your page. Don't worry too much if it's not a perfect circle, because as you know, apples aren't perfect either. And then we're going to draw a second circle just behind it, similar size. The next step is, on this one, we're just going to do a little bit of a dent, like that. And on this one, we're going to draw just a little bit of a mark just there, which is where we're going to do the centre of this one. Next, we're going to trim just a tiny little bit off this one, just to make it a little bit more apple-shaped. Now, if you have a rubber handy, you could rub those off, but I'll leave those there for now so you can see my workings. So then the next step is we're going to draw a bit of a stem coming out, maybe just like a little bit of a stick, and a little stem coming off this one. To see that's starting to look a little bit more like an apple now. Then the next step is we are going to draw a leaf. So I'm just going to draw a line coming off there on one side and then the other side. It's very leaf shape. And then after our leaf, we're going to add some shadows. Now it's fairly simple. So if you start coming from the bottom of your apple there, you can see how I'm using the natural curve of my wrist to give me that sort of arc. And same here, but obviously we can't see very much of this one because it's behind the other one. Now I'm just going to curve this around just a little bit, like that. And then what I'm doing next is I'm going to draw a line across. Now the line, you probably don't want it to be exactly in the middle of the page, otherwise visually it tends to chop it right in half. So there's a bit of a rule in art where you put something in thirds. Now, for some of the kids that are a bit young, thirds means if you were to chop it into three, it would be one of those little parts of three. So I'm going to be marking, if that was 1, 2, 3 parts, I'm going to do my line about there. Right across to the other side. So this part's going to be my foreground, and this part's going to be my background. It's a little bit, doesn't matter if it's a little bit crooked. There we go. All right, ready for the next step. Time to do some colour. So I've already chosen some of my colours here. You can see I've got a white, I've got yellow ready to go, I've got a light green, a slightly darker green, and even darker green again. I have 2 different shades of blue, and for my background this time, see this one's blue. This time I'm going to be using some reds and oranges for this section here. And in the background up the top on the first one I did black, So I might be doing some dark blues and purples into this one, just to give a completely different look. All right, let's get started with our apples. So the first step is leaving out the highlights. When you've got apples in front of you, especially when you go to the shops and you have a look at them, you'll see that they're quite shiny, especially if they've been polished with wax. So what we want to do is make sure we leave those nice shiny white bits out. Even though we've got a white pastel, sometimes it's a bit hard to come back over the top later. So it's better just to leave some gaps now that are going to stay white, and that way we don't have to worry about trying to colour over later on. So the first step is we're going to, on this one, make a funny shape like that. A bit like a bendy sausage. And another one just on the other side of our stem. Not too worried that I rode over the top of that. And on this one, we're going to draw a shape like that on there. And then another one just there. And sometimes you can put a little bit of a highlight on top there, but I might leave that one out just for the moment. And then after you've done that, that just gives you a bit of a guide, because next step is using the yellow. I want you to colour in everything except for those parts. So see how I'm blending around, going over my pencil line. With the yellow, you can see if your pencil's really dark, sometimes it does smudge it a little bit. So you just have to be careful there. Taking it right around. If your leaf goes in front of your other apple, make sure you just colour in just around it. So everybody's picture is going to be a little bit different because your circles will be in different spots too. And right around. Now because we're going to be blending it, we don't have to make it super, super, super thick. Just enough that it's going to be covering the paper. Sometimes it's best if you do a little test if you're not quite sure whether you've got enough. So to do that, you'll just get your bit of tissue and give it a rub, and if it spreads all over the page, then you know you've put enough down. And if it hasn't quite spread far enough, you can always put another layer on over the top. So filling in. You can see it's quite greasy, these oil pastels. They give a really interesting effect. Rub, 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 rub. So that's my yellow there, and now I'm going to get my tissues. Like that. And then I'm going to give it a rub. See how it starts to smudge? Like that, blending around. Actually feels kind of nice. Sort of smearing effect. Going in and around there. Going all the way around. There we go. Now we've got a few other layers to do on that, so I'm not too worried if it's not exactly perfect. And then next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some green. So I'm going to put some in the middle here, where it gets deeper inside the apple, and I'm going to put some around the outside edge, because remember apples are green, they're not yellow, so the yellow is just to make a nice bright toning underneath. And I'm going to go right over the top of all of this part. Smudgy smudge. This one we're going to bring right in to around there and fill in this half. Because if you imagine with the highlights, if you imagine the light's coming from this direction, and that's why the shadow's on that side. So if I had a torch or a lamp shining on that side, that's where the highlight will be. You could try that at home if you've got a bowl of apples there in your fruit bowl. You can get it and hold it up into the light and see what side of your apple the highlight is, the light part, and where your shadows are. You could have a go at trying to draw the ones from home if you like. Alright, filling in this one. And then next step is going to blend again. Now you'll see this time it starts to smudge in a little bit, like that, with the yellow that we've already got, and it just makes it a yellowy green. rub, like so. And then we're going to do the next bit, is come back with the next green. Now you'll see sometimes colours are a little bit different, like this one's a lot brighter and it seems to cover a lot better. So sometimes just depending on the brand and sometimes depending on the different colours, you get different effects. Going a bit darker in the middle bit there. I'm not too worried about the stem because the stem's going to be fairly dark later on, so we can fill that in. Smearing around, rub. So see, it's all about layers and building it up, bit at a time. And then I'm going darker and darker. If we started dark, we wouldn't have any areas that are left light. You wouldn't see them. Alright, just giving it a little rub, blowing it off. We're going to do a background later, so it's going to cover up all of that. Now the next thing is, I'm going to be adding a little bit of the blue for shadows. If you want to darken something a little bit, anything like that, it's perfect colour. Even if the picture that you're doing you don't think it's got blue in it, sometimes by adding a bit can actually really bring out the form and a bit of the contrast as well. You can see putting a little bit in there, especially around the base of these apples. I really want that nice shadow underneath. Some on this one too. See the difference the blue makes? A bit on this one too. Right at that part. Sort of really make it look a bit more 3D. A bit darker in the middle there. A bit darker in the dip of this one. Like so. Okay, so next bit, using our darker green, we're going to colour in our leaf all over, like that. And then I'm going to come back with that blue colour I was using, the dark blue. And I'm just going to shade in one side, just to make one side a little bit darker. There we go. Okay, so now, like I was saying before, doing my foreground a different colour here. So I'm going to be doing like an orange colour here, but I'm going to be using a darker red and even a little bit of the purple mixed in for my shadows. So this will give a completely different look to the other one. Be really nice and bright and vibrant. So shading around there, all the way around, not worried about my stem there. This will take a little bit of time because you've got such a big area to fill in, so take your time, enjoy the process. Rubbing down there. Oh, there's a little spider. I've got a friend come in to watch my art class today. Maybe he's a very arty spider. Alright, shading in. I'm not too worried about going right to the edges of my sheet. Sometimes that looks a bit arty if you don't quite finish it off. Okay. Now, like before, we're then going to use our tissue or our paper towel and we're going to smudge. Putting a little bit more on. Alright, smudge time. Got my tissue. Make sure you don't use the section that you already smudged the green on because we're going to get some interesting colours if that's what we do. Okay, smudging it all in. You can see I'm using some different directions. It's almost if you imagine you were using a paintbrush and you were doing your background. You might do cross-hatching, which is where you do sort of X's in different directions, or you might do a bit of a circular motion to make it really blurry and blended. So you could actually practice trying a few different techniques. That's That's what art's about. It's fun to experiment and try different things. And rubbing away. Don't worry if you go into the shadow part, because that's going to be a darker colour. There we go. And now, coming back with our darker orange. Now, some of you might know about the colour wheel. And if you don't, the colour wheel is a circle that's all broken up and it's got different colours in it, and certain colours are opposite each other and they call them contrast colours. So you might have a warm colour like orange on one side of the wheel, and on the opposite side of the wheel you'll find a cold colour. And contrast colours mean when you put those colours together, they really stand out and pop. And sometimes it's really good to actually learn your colour wheel. You can print them off online, and if you take note of which colours are opposite each other, even if you can't see it in your picture, if you add some of those in, it will really make your artwork look amazing. So it's something good to try. Adding a little bit of the darker red in over the top. So you can see I'm getting darker the closer I get to the apple. A little bit underneath. And then, just to mix a bit, I might put a bit of purple in there. This will really make it interesting. So see, that makes it cooler. When I say cooler, as in by using a colder colour over the top, it makes more of a shadow. I'm going to bring that right around a little bit more. A little bit there. And see already that picture's got such a different feel to this one. Okay, now a little bit of a blend there. And then we're going to start the background. So the background this time, I'm going to be using the blues. So I've got the light blue, medium blue and darker one again. So this one's called ultramarine blue. But sometimes when you get a set of pastels, it doesn't say the name on all of them. There we go. Rubbing. Now this is the blue I used earlier into my apples. When you're doing art, sometimes it's a good idea, if you use a colour, to see where else in the picture you could use it. Kind of like unites the artwork when the same colour is used in more than one spot. Going in around there. To here. Rubbing like before, it'll take a little while to do this bit. I'm going to add a little bit of this into here too. Lots of layering going on here. And then the darker one again. It's only slightly darker. This is quite a nice colour. This is my navy blue. It's good to mix different colours. And then I'm going to give it a blend. Actually, I might put a little bit of extra dark in there too. Give it a blend. Got my tissue handy. Just folding it over neatly so that I'm not mixing in the yellow. And like I did before, just dragging it in a few different directions so that it's not all even. Alright. Last of all, I'm just going to get a little bit of black. I'm going to draw in my stem on each one. Don't need to do too much. I might go just a tiny bit darker. And there you have it. So you can see two very different artworks, but almost the same approach. So let's see what you can come up with at home.